Thank you. So can everybody hear me okay? I'm kind of microphone-ophobic, I guess you could say. So one of the things is, as we go through the presentation today, I'm fortunate enough, I have an article that's been published in International Fly Fisher magazine. It's called The Fly Fisher. And a lot of what I'm talking about is highlighted in the article. So I don't have copies, but I can scan this and email this out to anybody. So grab one of my cards and shoot me an email, and I'll be more than happy to send a scanned copy of this over to you guys. Before we really get into things as well, how many of you guys have been out fishing within the last 2 weeks? All right. How many of you guys are out fishing within the last 2 weeks after 3 o'clock p.m.? All right. So now, if you're on the rivers after 3 o'clock, it's extremely, extremely harmful to the fish if you catch them. Right now, the water temperatures are really, really high. So studies are out there where trout at 70 degrees, the water is warm enough that there is a lower amount of oxygen in the water. So as the water warms up, the oxygen decreases. And at 70 degrees, that's kind of the threshold where it stresses out trout to where they could possibly die if they get stressed out too much at 70. Now, that's for a resting fish. So if you catch a fish and you're fighting them for a little bit, they're going to get a bunch of adrenaline going and they need more oxygen in that water. So we try to cut it off at about 65 degrees, 65, maybe 66. So really keep an eye on the water temperatures, especially this year. The flows are extremely low. There's a lot of algae and grasses that are growing, which are sucking oxygen out of the water. Plus the higher temperatures alone have less oxygen. So it's very detrimental to the fishery if you continue to fish once that water temperature hits above 66 degrees. So keep that in mind and have a little bit of respect for the fish. Get out early, fish early, catch them early, and then float and drink beer in the afternoon. So that works out. Well, you could float and drink beer and fish in the morning too. But anyhow, keep the afternoon for recreational if you guys don't mind. So today we have 137 slides to go through in only about 45. No, we have about 30 slides. That's it. But we're going to talk about fishing and tips of how do you row to increase your chances to catch more fish. So real quick, whitewater rowing versus rowing for fishing, two big differences. So the goal for both of them is to just get down the river safely. The number one goal, whether you're whitewater or fishing. So you got to keep that in mind, and we'll talk about that. Secondly, it's the thrill of the float versus the bent rod and the tug on the line. So two different second goals, really, when you're talking about these two different types of floating. Float fishing, rowing tactics, everything is slower than when you're going whitewater rafting. So you have to slow everything down, and you're going to hear that theme throughout tonight's presentation. You're going to backstroke more than 90% of the time. So if you see somebody that's fishing, when I give a lesson, I kind of stand in the back, and the people that are on the oars, I tap them on the shoulder for which hand to row backwards on. So it's a pull stroke versus a push stroke. And I slap them when I see them pushing. It's like, stop pushing. You always want to row backwards. So you always, always, always slow things down. You're going to point to the danger and pull away from it. When you're in a boat, whitewater rafting and a paddle boat, a lot of the times you look far enough downstream, you're carrying speed and momentum, and you go forwards to steer the boat. You're going faster than the current. Well, when you're rowing, you're going to be going backwards. You're going to be slowing things down. So point to the danger and row backwards away from that danger. Get out of the main current. When you're whitewater rafting, you see that bubble line. Bubble line's the fast part on the river. So that's where you want to get the boat, kind of pick the oars up and relax a little bit. When you're fishing, you want to get out of that. You want to get out of that bubble line. The fish tend to hang out where there is a seam between fast-moving water and slow-moving water. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, too. Obviously, you want to put the fishermen where the fish are. We'll talk about what that means. Look as far downstream as possible. Figure out where those fish are going to be. Identify your targets and make sure that you get that boat close enough within the capabilities of the people that are on the boat casting to be able to hit those targets. So the rower, the way I think about it is whoever's on the sticks, they're just as important as the fishermen when you're trying to catch fish, if not more important. Does that all make sense? Cool. Okay, so a couple things. You always want to have multiple rod setups ready. Why do you think that is?
So you don't have to tie up?
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. When you're wade fishing, you go out and you're standing along shore and you're hitting a hole, and if you break off or you want to change rigs, no big deal. You're still at that hole. Okay, if you break off in a boat and you're moving downstream, you've missed that hole, you've missed the next hole, you've probably missed the next 2 holes if you're retying. So you want to have multiple rods set up ready to go. And that rod holder is a great way to hold the extra rod so you can just reach down and grab one. Cast away from the boat, typically downstream or maybe 90-degree angle lateral to the boat. So you have this 14-foot or 13-foot shadow going downstream. Even in the Colorado where visibility is like 2 feet sometimes, that shadow is going to spook fish. I don't care what you say. I don't care how used the fish are to boats. It's going to spook them. It's either going to move the fish, or they're going to get out of the way, or they're just going to hunker down on the bottom of the rocks and they're not going to feed for a few minutes. So you always want to cast away from the boat as much as you can. If you're nymphing, you guys know what I mean by nymphing? So nymphing, you have an indicator, as fly fishermen call it. Everybody else in the United States calls it a bobber.
It's an indicator.
Yeah. So either way, whatever you call it, anytime that indicator ticks, and when I say tick, that means makes a dimple and a ring in the water. If it spins, anything, if it moves sideways, you want to go ahead and lift the rod and set. You're either going to catch a fish or it's going to be on bottom. You're going to pull it off of the bottom. So every single tick, you want to make sure that you lift your rod up. Who does not know what a mend is? All right, so a mend, think of your fly line. So you cast out and your fly is here, your boat is here, and there's a faster current here. Your line is going to make a big horseshoe shape downstream. A mend is simply flipping that horseshoe upstream to allow your indicator to continue to float at the pace of the water where the indicator is versus the pace of the fastest water where your line is. So it's just a flip of the line, and it's a way to get your indicator to float at the same pace as the water. So always mend. Presentation is absolutely critical, and that's what mending does. Mending makes that presentation, makes that bug float as natural as possible. A trout very, very seldom is going to go after an insect in the water that is moving different than the current. All day long they sit there and they hide behind a rock, or they're on the bottom where there's no current, and they see a bug floating along or bobbing along the bottom. It's going the same speed as the current. It goes up, feeds, comes back down. If they see a bug that's going across the water, going faster or slower than the water, they're going to ignore that. So it's really important that your bugs float at the same speed as the water, and that's what I mean by presentation. And again, slow the boat down. So in order to do all of this stuff, to mend your line, to get your bugs floating the same speed as the water, you want the boat to go as slow as possible. Great way to slow down, eddies. You guys all know what eddies are? Okay, so when you have a fast current, an eddy on the bank side, you're going to tuck back into that eddy, and you could hang out there all day long and keep casting up to where that fast water meets the eddy line, the slow water, and fish that seam just like you're wade fishing. So tuck back into an eddy, use that, and fish the crap out of those seams. Those are always really good spots. Once you know where the fish are holding, target that same water. So some days, like right now, the water's warming up. The fish are out in the riffles where there's more oxygen, and that's where they're feeding. They're out there in those areas. So those are the areas that we're targeting now. We're going to find those fish, and we're going to go through the flat water, through the deep holes. We're just going to push through that. Hey guys, pick up your lines. Let's get down to the next riffle because that's where the fish are. So target the same water where you're picking up fish all day long. It doesn't make sense to go and hit a deep, slow seam this time of year when you know the fish are in the riffles. Conversely, in the spring, they're typically in the slower water because it's much colder out and they're out of the riffles. So find out where the fish are and then target those same types of water, the same structure throughout the entire time. So as you're floating down a river, there's all kinds of small stream attributes. Most people start fishing by going out and wade fishing small creeks, Clear Creek or Boulder or something like that. I'm sure 90% of you guys have all started in that type of fashion fly fishing. So you know how to fish those small streams, and you want to find those small stream attributes in a huge river like the Colorado or the Roaring Fork, okay? So fish don't live everywhere in the water, so when you come up on a small stream, typically you're going to take a look and find a little plunge pool, a little waterfall or something along those lines, and the fish are going to hide back behind a rock, okay? Same thing on a huge river. Same thing on the big river here. So you have this rock right here, and you have this seam going along this bank, and all that slow water in there. Those fish are going to be hanging out along this bank in the slow water for a number of reasons. There's shelter in that area. There's a rock. There's something that they can use to shelter themselves from the current. There's food source. So you have this fast current ripping through here, and that's just a conveyor belt of food. All a fish does all day long is hang out and look for food. So they're going to be where there's a conveyor belt of food, and that's this fast current right in here. Oxygen, you need oxygen in the water. So again, you have a riffle. Faster water puts oxygen in it, and they like that. Nearer to the fast current, bubble line is a great area where you can see fish because that's where currents merge together. Where currents merge together, food merges together. So it's like two conveyor belts coming together to form one big one. So think of that in bubble lines. Eddies, we talked about that a little bit. And then off the banks. So the current, you know, most currents, you get about 6 feet away from the bank, and that's where the current starts moving. If you're 2 to 6 feet within the bank, there's not much of a current. Fish are going to hang out tight to the banks when the river's flowing. So we would float down here, and I would try to find an area. I'm not going to be going through here. I'm probably going to be coming up along this area where there's less of a current, and I'm going to tell my fishermen, hey guys, cast that seam on the right bank as we float through here. Now as you float through here, how many casts is each person going to get to that hole? One if you're good. One cast. So as the rower, I see that target and I let my fishermen know, hey guys, get ready. There's a seam on the right bank just past that rock. You want to hit that hole. So as the rower, be looking for those things and help your fishermen out. Help point out those types of places for them. Boulders and rocks. You got a big boulder down here. You got boulders along the edges. Fish, again, they'll hang out where there's no current back behind that rock, right next to the conveyor belt. Swim out, eat, and tuck right back in. Swim out, eat, and tuck right back in. So look for those types of structures. Big pools as well. So fish aren't going to be hanging out here in the middle of the river. They're fighting a current that's way too strong. You're going to be spending more energy in that area than they're able to eat. And that's not what fish are about. Fish are about hanging out, expending the least amount of energy as possible. They want to sit in that lazy boy and have the Doritos brought to them instead of getting up and going to the kitchen to get them. So that's what trout are all about. So some things that we talk about as we go down the river. Vocabulary is really important. So as the rower and the fishermen are talking throughout the day, you want to make sure that you understand what you're both talking about at the same time. So if this guy down here is facing upstream, is facing backwards, his right side is going to be river left. So I always let the fishermen know, hey guys, as the boat's pointing downriver, the right side of the river is always going to be on the right side, pointing downstream, going with the current. Left side's always going to be left. And I make sure the fishermen understand that. So if you are spun around looking backwards, and I say, hey, right side, there's a hole coming up, he knows to turn around and look to the right side of the river. So keep that in mind as understanding the river right and river left. How many of you guys go out fishing? You're stuck on the oars because you're the only one that knows how to row. All right, there you go. So try to figure out, if you're on the oars, you get to dictate who's in the front of the boat and who's in the back of the boat. And there's a couple of real important reasons for this. So you're the guy on the oars, and you want to make sure that these guys can catch fish. You want to put the worst fisherman up front, okay? That way everybody can see when he's casting and they can all duck and get the hell out of the way, okay? The guy in the back of the boat, if they could cast better, a lot of the times this boat is at a slight angle going towards the shore, so the guy in the back of the boat needs to be able to cast a little bit further, typically, than the guy in the front. So always put your worst fisher person, your worst caster, in the front of the boat, okay? Based on casting skills. Also, what are you using to fish? You guys all know what a streamer is? Yes? No? Anyone not know what a streamer is? Okay, some of you don't know. So a streamer is it's a bug. We call them all bugs, but it's a bug that imitates a fish. So it's a fly that imitates a small minnow or another fish, okay? So if you're casting streamers, you cast 6 inches from the bank, and you strip your line, you pull that bug away from the bank about 2 to 6 feet, and then you cast again. So it never fails. I go out with clients all the time, and they're like, yeah, I want to throw streamers and hook up that way. Great. Put them on a streamer rod. They cast 4 feet from the bank, and they're stripping 20 feet all the way over to the boat. That's not where the fish are. You got to cast 6 inches from the bank, and you pull it out about 6 feet from the bank, and then just recast. So you're constantly casting and slapping the water. So streamers, if you're fishing a streamer, always, always, always put that person in the back of the boat, okay? If they're both fishing streamers, then so be it. But the guy in the back of the boat's really the key spot for streamers. And the reason for that is this guy in the back of the boat is really casting against the shore all the way down here. So if you have a minnow or a small fish that's trying to evade a predator, is it going to take off and swim upstream? No, it's going to take off and swim downstream. It's going to go with the current to get away from whatever's trying to eat it. So if you're casting a streamer up here and you're stripping this direction, it's unnatural. You're not going to get anywhere near as many hits as if you're in the back of the boat, casting back behind the boat and pulling it downstream. Yeah?
So if you're just a rower and a fisher, would you say if you're going to cast streamers, should you go to the back?
Put them in the back, absolutely.
Nobody in the front?
No one in the front. Okay. Yep, absolutely. And that happens a lot. So every now and then I'll get the single guy that goes out, and it's in the fall, we want to chuck streamers. He gets out, jumps in the front of the boat, get in the back, dude. He's like, what? And I explain that to him. So you want to pull that streamer downstream, away from the shore, not upstream. So always put them in the back of the boat. Okay. River right, river left, we talked about that. Okay, more vocabulary. What's that look like? Clock, not a digital clock either. So, so the center of the clock is the rower. And you could change this. It's up to you guys, however you want to do it. But what I always tell the fishermen is, look, guys, when I'm giving direction to the boat, I'm the center of the clock. My right oar is 3 o'clock. My left oar is 9 o'clock. The front of the boat is noon. The back of the boat is 6. So if I'm telling somebody up front, hey, cast to that boulder at 2 o'clock, everybody understands what I'm talking about. So even the guy that's back here knows 2 o'clock is up in this direction, not over here. So it's not in relation to the person, not in relation to the fisherman. The fisherman's not the center of the clock. It's the rower. So always have that conversation. So if you see a target coming up, you have a hole that you want to make sure these guys are able to cast to, let them know, hey, talk about the clock dial a little bit. This is just fish porn. I had to throw it in there. So this was a big old brown. You could see a streamer, and we caught this in the fall up on the upper Colorado River. So pump house section. Okay. Also, the guy in the back of the boat, he's got a territory, just like the guy in the front of the boat has a territory. If the guy in the front of the boat is casting back here, okay, where's the guy in the back of the boat supposed to cast? He's kind of getting blocked out. So the guy in the front is poaching his water, and there's all kinds of really good fishy water up here that he could fish to that leaves the back of the boat able to get over here and fish to water in this area. So if the guy in the front is casting out to 3 o'clock, he's really hosing the guy in the back of the boat. And most importantly, he's forcing the guy in the back to fish to water where the shadows already cruised down and spooked fish. So again, you want to be focusing in the forward quarter of the clock, so between 3 o'clock and noon. So the guy in the front of the boat, he's got from like 2 o'clock to 12 o'clock. The guy in the back of the boat has really from 3 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Yes?
Do you always have your bow straight down the river, or do you have it at an angle a little bit?
In the pictures, they're always straight down, but that's never reality.
What's reality?
Yeah, reality is a slight angle. And the reason you have a slight angle, you know, it's not a 45-degree angle. It's more like a 25-degree angle or so. And I'll get into different strokes where you can go downstream this way and move the boat right or left without having to turn it. But the reality is you want to have it off angle just a little bit to be able to have some maneuverability right or left. Okay? If you're slowing down though, so let's say that the boat's angled going this direction and you do a backstroke to slow down, your boat's going to turn this way. So you're going to be pulling your fishermen away from these targets. So if you could always turn your boat so it's going parallel with the current and then row backwards to slow down, that's ideal because then you're keeping your fishermen the same distance. There's nothing worse as an angler, I put my buddy on the sticks and I go to cast and he's rowing backwards and my cast lands 5 feet short because he pulled the boat back 5 feet while I'm casting. So think about that as the rower. You want to keep that boat in position for the people that are casting. I talked about all of that. Okay, so let's break a river down into some pieces here, okay? So as you're floating downstream, again, fish don't hang out everywhere, all right? So here we're going to say that the current is going from the top down to the bottom, all right? So as you're floating along through here, what are the targets that you see coming up? So you have a little point coming out with an eddy and a seam. So here are the bubbles. So this is going to be a lot of foam. So the whirlpool of an eddy collects foam. You guys have seen that as you go down the river, right? And every now and then you look in that foam and you see little sippers coming up and eating in that foam, okay? So that's a place that fish hang out. More importantly, though, is you have a seam where the fast current meets the slow current. Fish hang out there a lot, okay? Boulders, this is all pocket water. So pocket waters, you have pockets of really good fishy water in the middle of crappy water. So as you float through, you go down past Yarmany, okay, past Yarmany Rapid, down below Radium before you get to Rancho del Rio on the upper Colorado, and you get to this big rock garden. I don't know if it's called the graveyard, tombstone, cemetery, whatever. I've heard all kinds of different names for it, but you get to this big rock garden, and that's very, very good pocket water. So the channel on that is river left. You can kind of sneak through, but you have all these rocks that are creating all these pockets for fish to hang out behind on the right side. So when I float through there, I try to get a boat through river right. It's very tricky at certain flows, but if you go river right through there and you go slow, you can hit every single one of those rocks and just pick it apart, and that's the pocket water. Fish love to hang out there. Couple reasons. As you go down a river, most boats don't go down there. They're not used to seeing boats. They're not spooked. So if they go down, if you're in the left current, in the left channel, that's where all the boats go. Fish aren't hanging out there. They're over on the river right. So think of a river as you go down it and you're fishing, and there's a fork in the river, and you have 3 boats in front of you that go to the left. Which way should you go as a fisherman?
Left, right.
Go to the right. Yeah, exactly. So it's not so much about where's the easiest passage getting through. Sometimes it is, but it's about going where the fish are going to be. So if you got 3 boats in front of you going down one way, go the opposite. Get away from them.
How long do you think a fish is spooked by a shadow?
It depends. You know, you read reports and it says fish have memories of 30 seconds. You know, but once you get a boat through there, that fish scurries along, and you're probably 3, 4, 5 minutes before another fish comes into that hole or that one circles back and comes back in. So it's more time than you have when you're on the sticks, I'll tell you that. So try not to spook them. Okay, so you have pocket water in here. You have some islands in here, and I just talked about the islands. You know, if a boat comes down here through the middle, go to the left. Fish hang out in the front of islands, and they hang out in the back of islands, okay? And then once you go through all this stuff in the river, everything funnels together, and this is the current, the main current out. The fish hang out right in the middle where you have all this big flat water. Everything's channeling together. So like the lakes above Yarmany, perfect example, perfect example. You have this really slow water that goes on for miles. It's nice and wide. Well, all that water has to funnel into a small area just up above Yarmany Rapid, and we fish the heck out of that area. There's a big bubble line that goes through there, so we'll pull over into that eddy and we fish that bubble line nonstop above Yarmany because all the fish, they know all that food from a mile up, they're coming down and that's where they're feeding.
You getting out there, pulling off and wade fishing in there?
Yeah, it's really tough to wade fish in there. Yeah, just hang out in the boat and do some laps in the eddy. Okay. So again, understand your targets. So as your boat's coming up, this is a pocket, so a rock, pocket water back behind the rock. You have a seam. You always have seams behind some type of a rock in the middle of the water. Typically you have two. You have the right seam and you have the left seam. So fish those seams. Okay? As you're going downstream, you see an eddy over here. So the rower should be saying, hey guys, eddy left side. That's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Let them know that. Okay? And then as they fish through here, so let's say that you're fishing the right side. Hey guys, let's hit the top of this pocket, the bottom seam of the pocket, up, and then we're going to switch over, guys. Get ready. Same structure, left side. So as the rower, you want to be calling out stuff because the fisherman's focused on what they're doing. They're typically not looking downstream. That's the rower's responsibility, is look downstream as much as you can, help your fishermen find those targets. Does that make sense? Cool. Oh, more fish porn.
Oh, wait,
How about that?
and I'm done.
Okay. So this is the Roaring Fork, and this is the Upper Colorado. This was early spring in the Colorado. This was late fall. You guys know where this is? Pump house. Up here's the campground, the low end of the campground. Okay. So this picture was taken as you drive down the trough road, a little pull out alongside the road. You can get out, hop out, and take this picture. This shows you just how fishy the water is at Pump House. This is why so many people go there, besides it being so close to Denver. So let's break this thing down to pieces, guys, okay? So as you come along here, what's this right up here? This is the campground, right? Okay, so typically, what do you see all the way along this bank? Yeah, so if you're in a boat, what side of the river do you fish? Other side, that's right. So you fish over here. And you have all these little points that stick out that create a little seam back here. Here's another point with a little eddy and a seam. Another point with an eddy and a seam. So we really fish this whole side, right side of the river as we come down. Okay? Then you get into some islands here. And again, if you're floating down, you got a bunch of rafters that take the first left, go ahead and just go right and head down this area. You have another passage through here, depending on what you see. Go right again, and then you have a couple different choices through here. So there's some really good small stream attributes. So let's focus on this stream right here. So as you float down, so there's a little rock in the water right here, typically at low water. There's a nice tree and a deep channel here. You have enough time to fish this point right here and then cut over to the left, or to the right, I'm sorry. And as you float through here, what does the oarsman need to be ready for?
He's either got to go left, or he's got to get down into that right channel right there.
Yep. So you got to make a decision one way or the other in here. Fishermen want to fish the point of this island. So again, you got this conveyor belt that's coming down, a single conveyor belt that comes down. That's where the most food is, and that splits off into two. So you're going to have more fish stacked up right here at this tip than you're going to have down this channel and that channel. So be ready to fish the point of an island before it splits off, okay? So then let's say that you get to this point and you shoot off to river left, and you float down through here. So current's coming in here, current's coming in here. What is this area right in here? It's an eddy, yeah. So as you float through here, you come down through here, let your fishermen know, hey guys, get ready, there's a nice hole on the river left, and then as soon as you get through there, there's a big eddy right here and a nice seam that comes down this way. And this is a great hole, there's a big beaver den right here. But this is a real nice stretch all the way through here. And you see people always anchored up in here or on the shore fishing, but really the main fish, it starts close, and then the further down the island you go, you want to cast out further and further. And you can see that current right through this picture. As you come down along here, you got a boat right here. You have the current goes and it pushes everything over into the right bank. So you have a slower current in here and a faster seam, so you fish that seam all the way through here. So really take a look at the river, where you're going to go, and start breaking it down so you're prepared as the oarsman to fish these different parts of the water. We talked about this a little bit. So more casting and false casting are needed with this approach, so take turns to avoid tangles. So that's key, is taking turns. So the better fishermen, where are they? Back of the boat, right? So if you get tangled up, whose fault is it all the time? The person in the back. Person in the back sees when the guy in the front's casting, so just hang out a second, let them cast before you cast. So in here, you're in an eddy. You're hunkered down in an eddy. The current is going from left to right, and you have this point, a little ledge bar here, and fish are hanging out here feeding. So the boat's hanging out, it's anchored, and it's just like you're wade fishing, okay? If you go wade fishing, you're not going to go wade fishing 10 feet from your nearest buddy. You're going to walk down and get, 40, 50 feet away from them. You don't have that opportunity in a boat, so you have to take turns. Keep that in mind. So when you're anchored up and you're fishing a hole, make sure you communicate, and don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm casting, Bob, and then get your cast in so he knows, and you don't spend your time sitting in this hole untangling stuff instead of fishing.
How often do you use the anchor, say on a pump house, aquarium, or ranch house?
It depends on who's in the boat with me. Typically, I use the anchor every time somebody tangles up. I'm going to pull over, drop anchor, untangle, re-rig. So sometimes that's 50 times a day, other times it's 5 times a day. You just don't know. But if you get to a hole like this, so let's talk about the Upper Colorado. You go past the hot springs. You have cabin campground on the right side before it takes a sharp left turn, and you have that wall with the last tunnel for the train. So as you go around that wall, then there's a little straightaway, and it's what we as fishermen call it the merry-go-round eddies. So you have one on the right and one on the left with a campground on the left, okay? So this is where the campground would be. Big eddy in here, real big eddy in here, and a smaller eddy on this side. But we hang out, and I drop anchor in that eddy all the time, just to keep the boat still so I can rest my arms and let them fish. So use the anchor as much as you want or as little as you want. It really doesn't matter. Inside bends, eddies, we talked about all that stuff. Okay, so casting. So again, you're in a boat, you're 10 feet away from your buddy, crimp your hooks. Highly recommend that, especially if you're in a raft. A raft has a lot more webbing and just things to get hooked up on than a drift boat does. So always crimp your hooks. It makes getting the hooks out of your shirt, out of your hat, out of your skin, out of the boat 100 times easier, as well as it's easier on the fish, okay? So keep that in mind, crimp your hooks. If you catch a fish and that fish gets off, well, kudos to the fish, it won, okay? That's gonna teach you how to be a better fisher person by keeping the line tight as well too. Always try to cast on the same side of the boat. So if you're rowing downstream, you wanna call off a target on the right side, get both anglers fishing that right side at the same time. That way the lines are going the same direction at all times instead of a lines going like this, okay? You're gonna have a lot less tangles throughout the day if both fishermen fish the same side of the boat. Learn to pick up your line and lay it right back down. So remember at the very beginning I said every single tick on that indicator set that hook. So when you set, you're actually gonna lift your line up, oh, there's nothing there, and you're gonna lay it right back down, okay? The more often you can do that, the better off you are. The more your line is in the water, the more fish you're going to catch. 8 out of 10 fish are caught in the water, I'm told, and the less tangles you're going to have. So keep your lines in the water. A roll cast is a really good cast from the boat. How many of you guys use a roll cast or know what a roll cast is? Okay, those of you that don't know what a roll cast is, give me a call and I'll show you sometime. But basically, you're bringing your line in. It's not a river runs through it. You know, I mean, that's for Hollywood. You aren't false casting with your line, whipping through the air back and forth. It's about keeping that line in the water, and a roll cast helps you do that. Sidearm. So I'll show you a diagram on this. But the sidearm cast, if you could cast sidearm, so if you're in the front of the boat and you want to cast the right bank and you're right-handed, and if you go like this over your right shoulder, where's all your line going? Over the rower and over the back fisherman. So if you want to cast that right bank, try to learn how to cast across your body, okay? So do a sidearm cast. And same thing for the person in the back of the boat. If they have to cast to the left bank, and they're right-handed in the back of the boat, I mean, really, it's about turning over and going sidearm. So try to learn a sidearm cast as much as possible. And again, the person in the back controls the tangle. Look downstream, be prepared. So we talked about that, targets all the time. Always use different depths too. So as you float down river, you're always in different depths. So as you float down the river, you're going to be in a shallow riffle where it might be 6 inches to a foot deep, drops off into a deeper pool then that might be 4 or 5 feet deep, goes to a big hole that might be 10 or 12 feet deep, okay? What I always try to do is set your indicator, if you're nymph fishing, to the depth where the fish are. So if you know they're in the riffles, just set it for the shallow part and fish the riffles. If you know they're in the deeper water, set your indicator for the deeper water, and you get to a riffle, hey guys, pick up, sit down, have a beer, and let's get down to the next deep hole. Instead of constantly changing your indicator, because the fish are always going to be in the same place, the same depth typically. All right, boat position. So we talked about this. So you got 2 fishermen on the boat, and you want to make sure that both fishermen are in position to get to a target at any one time. If the boat moves, then that target is essentially moving. So if you're in the middle of a cast and that boat is pulling back away from a target, then you need to make sure that you could let out more line in that cast. Subtle movements if you're the rower. Make short, subtle movements throughout the whole day. Don't spook the fish by slapping your oars, okay? Learn to put your oars in the water quietly so the blades are vertical, and take them out vertically, okay? Splashing of oars will spook fish. If you take an oar and you bang it on the rocks, that vibration is going to go for yards down the river. So be conscious of what your oars are doing at all times. Yep, oar placement quietly. Okay, so the crawl stroke, this is a stroke where to keep your boat going downstream parallel to the current, and you could still move right or left. Okay, how many of you guys know what the crawl stroke is? Very few of you. Okay, so the crawl stroke, so here you have your right oar going straight downstream, your left oar is going out to the left. This is going to move the boat to the right. So as you're rowing, so picture I'm going downstream, I'm going to put the oar in and I'm going to push it. So the blade is going to go from outside to the boat. So I'm going to push it that way, and that's going to start moving the boat over to the right. What that's going to do is turn the boat, so at the same time then I'm using the left oar, so it's a push-pull at the same time. It's one of these strokes. So it takes some getting used to, but the crawl stroke, next time you're out in the river, try to move your boat from right to left without turning your boat, okay? I see some of you guys trying to imitate that. It's muscle memory. You got to develop it. So the blade is, we don't have oars on the boats. So the blade is vertical, okay? So it's going vertical, going forward. So think of this as the blade. So the blade is going this way. You come up and push. You come out and push. So you're pushing with your handle that way. You come up and out and push. So your blade is going, it goes in the water here. You push it this way, comes out of the water, back in, and push. Make sense? Okay. Can I get a couple oars? So, yeah, crab stroke, crawl stroke, that's exactly the same thing. Yep. Yep.
So what are you doing on your left hand?
Left hand, then you're just using it to put the boat, to keep it straight.
Okay.
Okay?
I can act as the.
You could act as the oar lock?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Like that.
I love it. I love it. All right. So we'll go that way with it. I'll back up. All right. So this is going to go down, out. So it's a push. You got to push this one back. Yep. Hold it up, man. Come on. Oar lock. Give me an oar lock.
Yeah.
There we go. So it's like this. This is the motion. Come on, man. So it's a same time. So you're going backwards with this one and sideways with that one. Does that make sense? It's a lot easier in a boat. The oar locks are more stable, man.
Is that picture in your article?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yep. So learn to do the crawl stroke. You could YouTube it. There's all kinds of videos on how to do the crawl stroke. You know, spend some time on YouTube. They'll show you how to do that. You could crawl stroke right and crawl stroke left. The important thing is going to be you could move the boat right and left without having to turn the boat. So both your anglers are the same distance from whatever the target is at all times. Okay? Okay, so the other thing, and I didn't talk about this, it allows the boat to be very close to shore. So if you're only 4 or 5 feet from the right bank because you're fishing a eddy line on the left side, so you're tucked into an eddy, really tight to that right bank, you can't get an oar out without hitting the ground. So again, then you can go ahead and put that oar up front and push your boat out and use your left oar to keep it straight. So it allows you to go downstream right next to the bank and still have your oars in the water. Okay? All right, let's talk about some equipment. So obviously you need some type of a raft, a dory, pontoon, something along those lines. I strongly recommend lean bars. Even with lean bars, I got one guide, he's dumped 3 people in the last 2 years. I don't know how he's done it. He's been the only guide that ever has done it. But they all fall in when they're not using the lean bar. So use a lean bar. It's so much easier when you're casting to lean up against the lean bars in the front or the back of the boat. It gives you that much more casting ability for better distance, better accuracy, and that lean bar is going to keep you in the boat. So if you have a raft, go ahead and invest in some lean bars if you're going to be doing a lot of fishing. A stable floor is key. So there's 2 different types of stable floors in my opinion. One is the plated aluminum floors that Downriver has. I have those in all of our boats. It's absolutely wonderful. Another stable floor, a lot of boats are coming out with a drop stitch floor. So if you're looking at buying a raft and you don't want to invest in the actual floorboards, invest in the drop stitch at least for the boat. Okay, so get something that's stable, something more than the corduroy that's in the bottom of a boat. An anchor. So an anchor it's a great tool to have. So when you're fishing, you're going to be pulling over a lot to retie, re-rig, those types of things. So go out and get yourself an anchor. It allows you to drop an anchor, stop in the river without having to get out, pull the boat up on shore, re-rig, and then relaunch it again. Rod holders. So, excuse me, if you're going to have multiple rod setups, you need a place to keep those rods safe. Rod holders are an absolute must in my opinion. Long-handled net. Don't go fishing with a short wading net. It's really hard to reach out over the edge of the boat without a long-handled net. Safety equipment, just the same as you would on a whitewater trip, okay? Bring some extra clothes along. A 9-foot rod in Colorado is plenty in a drift boat, okay? You see a lot of people that are going to want to bring a 10-foot or an 11-foot rod, sometimes a spey rod even. You don't need that. You're going to use the boat to get to that person's casting abilities. You don't need that extra foot or foot and a half. 9-foot rod is just plenty. In a boat, you're going to use shorter leaders typically, okay? So you're going to use a 7-foot leader or a 9-foot leader at most. Keep the 10-foot and 12-foot leaders for wade fishing, okay? A shorter leader is all you need in a boat. And again, that's because you're putting the boat in position and you're getting a longer drift than you would if you're wade fishing. So you could get a 200-foot long drift in a boat, and that leader has plenty of time to sink and get your bugs down to the bottom. Fluorocarbon tippet, it's a must. Your tippet is just going to get hammered. You're going to lose 3 times the number of flies when you're fishing out of a boat than you would when you're wade fishing. When you're wade fishing, you just walk upstream, yank it out upstream. When you're floating and you hang up on the bottom, you're paying that guy rowing the boat a lot of money if he's going back up to get your flies all the time. It's a lot of work. You can't do it. So fluorocarbon tippet, it's a little bit more abrasive resistance, and it also sinks better. Again, multiple setups, plenty of flies because you're going to lose a lot of them. That was it for equipment. Okay, so how do you get better at rowing for fishing? By rowing for fishing. Yeah, spend some time on the sticks, without a doubt. So in the state of Colorado, for
Willing to, volunteer my fishing time to anybody who wants to row. I will help you.
So in the state of Colorado, in order to be a fishing guide, you have to take a 50-hour class, just the same as whitewater, and then you have to have 500 miles on the sticks, 250 commercial and 250 private. And that's for a reason. Mostly for safety, because over 500 miles you're going to see pretty much anything that can happen. But when you're fishing, I got some guides that don't have that 500 miles, and you could tell that they aren't able to maneuver the boat as much as they can. So those guys are out doing my wade fishing trips, and they're not doing my rowing trips. Yeah, cover river miles. It's the best way to do it. I do offer lessons, as they mentioned before. Lessons I love, simply because I get to fish, and I'm just barking orders during the day. It's kind of cool. And then, yeah, also go on a guided trip. Not just wherever I'm guiding. I could care less who you use, but if you're going to go to a new river that you haven't experienced before, go ahead and hire a guide. If you're going to be up there for 3 days, hire a guide for the first day. Let them show you where all the holes are, and then go do it your own the next 2 days. Guides have all that river knowledge. They know what flies are working, what depth they're at, where they are in the river. So use that to your advantage if you're going to a new location. All of this is good information, but none of it matters, though, if you're not getting down the river safely. So the rower's #1 responsibility, and I can't stress this enough, is get down the river safely. So how many of you guys saw the drift boat that was wrapped up in the cemetery area last year? Yeah, that boat caused a fatality a couple days later. So you have to be very, very careful and make sure you're doing what you can to get you and your people down the river safe, and get all your equipment out of the river safe as well, too. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. Again, grab my business cards if you want to get a copy of that article. If you guys just want to find out, hey, what's working, pick up the phone, give me a call, I'll tell you, hey, this is what I've seen in the last couple days on the Roaring Fork or on the Colorado. I have no problem giving you guys some information. But that's what I got. What questions you guys have?
That's awesome. So I'll talk to you a little bit about, like tactics for fishing.
Uh-huh.
So in my experience, I do most of my trips that are on a raft with a guy that does that at Salida, and we'll do the Arkansas.
Okay.
Right. So we love to fish the streamers, but typically, I'll take the oars for 30 minutes. He'll take the oars for 30 minutes, and we just trade.
Right.
Right. But we're almost always like fishing the front of the boat, so it was kind of enlightening to hear you say, because we do streamers a lot.
Yeah.
So we should be telling each other, get to the back of the
Get in
boat.
the back of the boat, or go down the river backwards.
Yeah.
So.
So, but that being said, if we're not fishing streamers, what's the best method for just nymph fishing, or I do like to Euro.
Yep.
Do a little Euro style.
Yep. Euro nymphing is very, very difficult in a boat. Yeah. It's meant to be done from shore. But nymphing, so a trout, 90% of a trout's diet are bugs that are floating along the bottom of the river. That's just what they eat. Only 10% of the time is a fish going to come up and actually take a fly off the surface. And there's certain times of the year where that's not so true. But like in the last couple weeks of June, first couple weeks here in July on the Roaring Fork, it's the green drake hatch. So a green drake is the largest mayfly that's out there. Big, big, big mayflies. They're about yay big. They land on the water. They lay their eggs. They do this about an hour before sunset, and you just see that river explode with fish constantly feeding on top, eating those green drakes. But the other 23 hours during the day, they're nymphing. They're eating the bugs, the nymphs. So I always nymph. And then if there are dry flies, then I'll throw a big, big, big dry fly up top that will float a nymph below it. So it's called a dry dropper at that point.
So what do you like to do as far as the nymphing is and the position of your nymphs relative to the boat? If I'm in the front of the boat and Lily's got the oars, for instance, right? And we're kind of downriver, usually at that right there, back up.
Wait, hold on.
That was a great angle.
We're going to go to this one.
Okay. So the boat, I mean, usually the boat is turned a little bit. So me in the front of the boat, nymphing wise, is that pretty much the best position to?
Yeah, I mean,
That 45-degree angle, either left or right.
So
just let your flies kind of.
yeah, so it really doesn't matter. It matters where the target is and where the boat is in position to that target. So if you're in the front of the boat and there's nobody in the back of the boat, it doesn't matter if the boat's going down the river sideways. It makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. That way, then the person in the front of the boat, whoever's on the oars, can get that person over here to fish this seam back behind the pocket, or over here to fish this eddy or whatever. So if you're only an oarsman and a fisherman, and you're not throwing streamers, put them up front, and that boat can do 360s all day. It makes no difference because you only got one person you have to worry about. Okay? It gets more difficult when you have two anglers. So now you have two anglers that have to get in here and fish this seam. So it's important to get the boat as straight as possible, so you could cast both out to the side. So this guy's going to fish this 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock position. This guy should be fishing up here in the 2 to 3 o'clock position, okay? And you need to position the boat for that.
And then as the angler, what do you find is the most, I guess, effective way to fish? Just kind of get the boat flowing the same speed as the current, and you just hang out there?
Slower than the current.
Person?
Slower than the current. So
the angler just bends a little bit and you just kind of keep your bugs floating with the boat, with the seam, or with the current?
yeah, you're going to get your bugs floating with the current. So let's talk about the casting here. So the guy in the front of the boat has from, say, 2 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So his cast is going to be out here to 2 o'clock initially, because the boat's going to be going slower. And by the time he picks up and recasts, it's going to be in the 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock position. And then he's going to pick up and recast. So one of the reasons you want to be going slower is, first of all, you have more maneuverability. But instead of ripping by this hole and only being able to get one cast in there, if you're going slow enough, you might be able to get 2 casts in that same hole. So that's one of the reasons why you want to go slower, is so you have more opportunities to hit a target.
And then landing success, once you hook a fish, what's the best technique to kind of put the boat in good position? I personally kind of like to, if you turn the boat so that your fish will run upstream and kind of bring them down to you to net it.
Yeah, it just depends on, so first of all, if you got 2 fishermen, and yeah, so if you got 2 fishermen, somebody hooks up, you should always tell the other person, hey, get your line in, okay, that doesn't have a fish. Just go ahead and get it in. And then you're going to put the bow of the boat, or the stern of the boat if they're in the back of the boat, towards the fish at all times. So the worst thing that can absolutely happen if you hook up to a fish is that fish darts underneath the boat, and you don't spin the boat, it goes underneath it, the rod hits the bottom or snaps off on the boat, and you break your rod. That's worst case scenario, and I've seen that happen a lot, where the fish goes under the boat because there's shelter under the boat. So sometimes they try to do that. So the oarsman always needs to try to row and spin that boat to keep the fish off to the bow. An angler should be able to get the head of the fish up as quick as possible, get the head of the fish up out of the water, because they lose control and they lose direction at that point, and then you can scoop them with a net. You can lift them up out of the water, the head only out of the water, not the whole fish, get it over close to the boat, and then get a net under it. Side pressure is really good. If the fish is trying to run and it's going to go out into the current, again, you want to keep that fish in the slow current. Get it over to where it's not off in the current and it's going downstream with the current. You're never going to catch that fish. It's going to be gone. It'll break off. So side pressure, get in the slow current, get its head up out of the water, and then long-handled net to reach under the fish. Make sense? Cool.
What's your minimum, in this scenario, distance from the scene, or ideal?
So, again, it depends on the casting ability. 30 feet, 25 feet, that's all you need. So you figure you got a 14-foot long shadow. If you're in 4 or 5 feet of water and the sun is low, that shadow might be over another 8, 9 feet on the bottom. So that's how far away the shadow is. Get another 5, 6 feet away from that, you're 15 feet. So 20, 25 feet, I mean, that's all you need. If the sun's straight up above you, then you can be closer because that shadow's not going off to one of the sides.
I always have issues with the indicator location as well as the length of tippet. What's a good all-around? Do you have any advice for me on that?
So again, your leader is either a 7-foot or 9-foot leader. At the end of the leader, I always tie on about 18 inches of tippet. Tie your bug on. And then if you need weights, you put the weights up above that tippet knot. That keeps your weight from sliding down.
So in between the dry, or nymphing, you have your indicator, bigger bug, nymph, and you have your BBs in between the nymph and the bigger bug?
No, you have it up above your bigger bug. Yep. So you have a leader down to a knot where your tippet's tied on. Then your first bug's at the bottom of the tippet. So that knot, if you put you crimp a weight in above that knot, that stops it from sliding down, which happens a lot. So that distance, call it 18 inches or 12 inches, you want that distance from the tippet to your bug to be the same distance as that bug down to your next bug. So keep everything the same distance apart from each other. Whether it's 18 inches or 12 inches, it's really just a preference standpoint at that point. You're going to have a lot less tangles because everything's going to roll over at the same time.
That's what I run into.
Yeah. And then you set your indicator up on the leader. What I've seen a lot of people do is they'll have a leader and they'll tie on 4 or 5 feet of tippet below that leader, and now all of a sudden you have 14 foot of line. Your bottom 5 feet you can't control because it's just tippet material. Okay.
On a river like the Colorado, what X tippet do you usually use?
I never go above 4, well, I never go lighter than 4X. So the Colorado, it's a great river. If you have 2 foot of clarity, 18 inches of clarity, it's fishing really well. And the fish aren't leader shy or tippet shy. So you could go 4X. I go 3X a lot of times. If I'm throwing streamers, I'll go 1X on streamers on the Colorado. Roaring Fork's a little different. What's that?
10-pound test or
Yeah, 5. So 4X is 7 pound. So 4X is typically 7 pound. 5X is 6 to 5 pounds. So always go a little bit heavier on the Colorado. I'm sorry?
that's not a leader shy.
No, not at all. Not at all. Roaring Fork's a little different. I'll use 4X and 5X on the Roaring Fork because it's so clear. The fish are a little bit leader shy on that. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What's the Colorado running right now?
So last I saw it was 8:39 at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So it's good. There's 450 coming or 440 coming out of Green Mountain Reservoir. So that's dropped the water temperature down quite a bit, which is good. Again, like I said, yesterday it hit like 66, 67 degrees at about 3 o'clock. So.
Can you start fishing again when it gets later in the evening?
Yeah, on certain rivers, what you'll see on the Colorado is it'll spike, the temperature spikes at about 6 o'clock at night, and then it starts coming down. So it's not cold enough again until, 8, 9 o'clock at night. So it's really difficult. So that's why we try to get out early in the morning. Some rivers are a little bit different, like the Roaring Fork has a high temperature earlier in the day, and it's moving enough water that you can get out before sunset and fish with it cooler on the Roaring Fork. So.
Can you talk about bugs from pump house and then from below State Bridge by time of day?
By time of day. No. I thought you were going to say by season. Yeah, that's easy. No, time of day, it depends on the season. So, like we have a trip on Saturday, we're going out, and I already know I'm going to have a patch rubber leg up top, black patch or a coffee patch rubber leg. That's going to be my first bug. And then down below that's going to be a pheasant tail on one rod and a hare's ear on another rod. So just start with the staple bugs, and you kind of got to get out and see what's happening. If you see caddis coming off, then you're going to go to a caddis pupae or an emerger. Right now PMDs are coming off, so you might want to switch to a pale morning dun. Midges in the fall and winter. I mean, I always start with a staple bug, see what happens. I'm pretty confident that you have about 5 bugs in the whole state of Colorado, and if you throw those 5, you'll catch fish any time of the year, as long as they're presented properly. So it's a lot about the fishermen.